Moin, and welcome to the links! Easter is around the corner, so that means it's time for another special. And like all of them this year, it's not going to be as cute as it looks like at first glance, so stay tuned! But before we start, I quickly wanted to thank my wonderful patrons who still support me in these difficult times. I am more than thankful for this wonderful community, and I'm already planning some exciting things to come this year. So far, we reached the goal to have an exclusive video every month on Patreon, and it's completely up to you with how much you want to support me to see all the content. Feel free to check it out, I really appreciate it. But now let's start with the video. For a long time I wanted one, and now I finally had the chance to get my hands on a Catherine Deneuve doll, so I couldn't resist using her for this project. As always, I separated head and body and removed all the factory paint and hair to just have this lovely white base to work with. To be honest, I was a little insecure since white dolls are so rare and I felt a little pressure to not mess it up. I wish I could only work with white bases since they are so easy to dye, what makes them so versatile and perfect for customs. But let's concentrate on what we have now. Taking the chance, I decided to make her a white bunny, which perfectly fits the story I already had in mind. As always, I let her head soak in pure acetone to shrink it. It already was a little smaller than usual Monster High heads, so one round of shrinking was enough. While the head enjoyed the chemical treatment, I started working on the body. First thing to do was of course sanding down the printed on panties and factory scars. After that I gave her legs a little trim because I imagined her to be shorter than usual. You know, the classic super adorable white bunny. Moreover, I wanted to give her long and plushy bunny feet. For that, I kinda completely destroyed the structure of the feet, so that I could possibly just rebuild them completely by myself. But it's always nice to have some sort of base to work on it. Speaking of a base, I now had to reattach all the parts again, of course. To do that, I used some toothpicks, wire and glue. It was a little tricky since I had to pay attention that her legs turn out the same length and her feet both lay flat on the ground when she stands. But after some time, it worked out. When the glue was dry, I filled the gaps with my beloved Apoxie Sculpt. I also formed her new feet and added some clay to her thighs to make her look even cuter. I let that dry again and added another layer of clay to her feet to bring out the shape and form some toes. So now we're done with the epoxy, right? No, because now the fun part begins. The end of the cuteness. Her front should be the lovey-dovey, cutesy, innocent rabbit girl, but her back keeps a secret. So let's turn her around and give her a spine peeking out of her skin. I think sculpting this once again showed me that I really improved on working with epoxy, which makes me really happy. When all the modifications were completely dried, it was time for sanding again. This time I just smoothed out all the rough imperfections, since I planned to cover her legs in flocking anyway, so no need for perfection here. When I was satisfied, I sprayed her with Mr. Super Clear Sealant to have something the color could hold on to. After that, I picked a simple white acrylic paint and my wonderful little airbrush to paint her. Sorry for the bad camera quality, by the way. The lighting was a little not so good. When she was white again, I let her dry and sealed everything with Liquitex matte varnish. Now we worked so much on the body and completely neglected the head. Time to change that. I sketched the eye shape on the shrunken head to have a guideline where to cut. All the Cat Monster High dolls have the same head sculpt, with the fierce and sharp eye mold. I kinda messed it up to make that super cute when I made Lynx back then, so I was a little nervous about this doll now. But hey, better messing up than not even trying, I guess. So I went straight in. As you probably know, this is not my first time cutting out eyes, and I have to say that I also gained some speed and security in this field. It's incredibly satisfying to be able to literally watch yourself improve. Something I really enjoy about doll customization, but it's probably the same with everything you do on a regular basis. What about you? Do you have a skill where you can see yourself improve upon so regularly? Or even small steps that make you proud? Tell me about it in the comments. After I was satisfied with her big round eyes, it was time to open up her head. Which was a little struggle because, as you can see, I had problems deciding where to cut because of her ears and something I planned for her head. But let's tackle that later. First, her head needed some paint where the hair goes. I actually saw a fabric with lavender plants on it and I was sold on the color palette immediately. So our little white bunny will get some violets and greens in her design. When the paint was dry, I was able to start the reroute, the part that takes most of the time for me. But even though it takes so much time, I always think it's worth it in the end. I think the trick with yarn is to find a balance to make it look full, but not like a helmet. That's why I separate the strands in smaller sections before punching them into the head. The only problem I had with this method was the part line, which mostly turned out to... I don't know a word for that. You know, when there were 2 less strands, so the plastic was visible. That was the problem. And to change that, I used complete yarn strands on the part line this time. Simple solution, I know, but I never thought about it before. Now that the reroute was done, I continued the body mods. You remember her cat ears? I cut them a little and inserted these wires to create ears that fit a bunny a little better. But the moment I wanted to start sculpting, I realized that brushing the yarn out afterwards could be difficult. So I did this first with a wired pet brush and flattened the strands with some water and a flat iron. Just like ironing clothes, since it's yarn after all. So now it was nice and shiny and I could start sculpting her ears. But instead of epoxy, I used silk clay this time, because I saw DOLLMOTION use it for ears that were still movable after drying. From my elf repaint, I remembered this to be pretty tricky to sculpt, since it's not really sticky and, once separated, difficult to bring back together. But it worked out better than back then, and that made me really happy. When the ears were dry, they were indeed still bendable, which was great. To cover up the imperfections of the clay, I prepared some flocking that I glued on her ears for some fluffiness. Looks pretty good so far. So now we have body and head modded. Time for some paint, right? Close. There was still one thing that needed to be modded. I'm talking about her claw hands. Not so fitting for a cute little bunny, so they needed to go. I had these Obitsu spare hands that I wanted to use instead, but without losing the joint. My solution? Gluing them on the factory hands. To do that, I needed to trim her hands down a whole lot beforehand. I ended up with only one little piece where I could switch on the new hand and secure them with epoxy glue. And when that was done, I added some epoxy clay to fill the gaps and make the whole construct more stable. I really had to pay attention to not accidentally block or glue the joint mechanism so her hands remain movable. But lucky me, it all turned out really nice. And now it was time for the paint! I started with the head again, that I sprayed with Mrs. Super Clear sealant before I added colors. She still had some strong facial features that I needed to cover up with the face up, so I started with the most dominant part, the mouth. I painted her lipstick with acrylic paints to already have the shape clear before adding pastels and such. To kinda break the mold, I painted the corners of her mouth way higher and more towards the middle of her face than the molded ones. It gets more visible later, but like that she now has a way smaller mouth than before, what gives her an innocent and childlike appearance. Next thing was her eyeliner. I also painted this with acrylic paints to have a guideline where to put her lid fold and eyebrows later. It's a technique I saw some BGD artists do, with the same explanation, and it helped me a lot. Again, her face sculpt made it a little difficult to get the lines even, since the shape of the plastic above her eyes varied from one to the other. But after a while, I was happy with the result. Now I continued with my pastels and watercolor pencils. Since her face is framed by the lavender hair and lips, I decided to give her green eyeshadow. As blushing, I use a light skin color so she looks a little more alive and not the sickish pale. Especially around her nose that I also colored with a light flesh tone like white rabbits have. And then the eyebrows. Like always, I first blushed them on with pastels and erased them in the right shape. Sealed it with varnish and drew in some lines. This time with watercolor pencils instead of acrylics. They still do not look like from a professional, but I guess better than usual. I just keep practicing and hope for the best. Actually, I also added some micro glitter to the face, but after the sealant it wasn't visible anymore, which is a little sad, but the glitter I have is not what I would call super high quality, so I guess I can't complain. Now that her face was done, her body needed some attention too. Or to be more precise, her back. I really liked that the grey of the epoxy was still visible through the thin layer of white paint, so I kept it that way without spraying another layer of white on top. Color-wise, I basically just smashed on some reds, blues, lilacs and greens around the spine to make it look wounded and infected. That's actually the most fun part about horror designs. You can't do wrong. Just go ahead and color everything as messy as you like. It looks planned. After the blushing, I added some little veins with a red and a blue watercolor pencil, and the body was done too. I sealed everything with MSC and Liquitex to have everything well protected before I continued. It was now time to reassemble the doll, so I started with brushing out her hair, since it's a little easier while the head is still separated from the body. The procedure is the same as on the head cap I showed you earlier. I then heated the vinyl of the head with a hairdryer to make it soft, so that it easily goes back on the body. The next step was now to give her some lashes. For that, I placed a little glue inside her eye hole and pressed the lashes against it with the help of a toothpick. It can be a little tricky at that size, but just stay patient and it works out. See? Sure, they are still too long, but I always wait until the glue has dried completely to trim them and insert the eyes. Speaking of eyes, here are the ones I made for her. Since I'm trying out new ways to make them at the moment, I'm not showing you the process here, but you can watch my older videos to see how I used to make them. It's not that much of a difference since they are still eyes made of resin. And here we have our little white bunny. I think she already looks super cute and I'm really happy how she turned out. Especially since I was so nervous about her head sculpt. But we're still not done yet, and just gluing back the head cap would not solve the problem, because I made a big hole in the back of her head that needs to be filled with epoxy. Yay! More creepy mods! I'm trying to sculpt a mouth. Oh yeah! First thing was of course the lip, which was pretty simple, but I soon came across my first problem. The space. She still had the neck pack in her head that needed to stay untouched from the clay in order to stay movable. So, not much room for a tongue and teeth and some sort of back plate. After a little while, I managed to sculpt all this and repeated the steps on the head cap. When both parts were dry, I could reattach them with some glue. And please, I know, okay, this mouth looks more like the other end of a digestive system. I am aware of that. But it's supposed to be creepy, so it's a win somehow. Anyway, the doll was reassembled and the only thing that needed some color was this beautiful mouth. So I took my acrylic paints and again smashed some color on it. First a base of strong red that I toned down with darker browns and some blues. Moreover, I used the colors with lots of water so the gray of the epoxy shines through and makes it look muddy. In the end, I sealed the colors with Liquitex High Gloss varnish to make it shine and look wet. The very last thing to do on the doll itself was now to give her some flocking. I imagined her legs covered in fur looked really cute, but to be honest, looking back now, I wished I had just left them without flocking. Well, it is now how it is, and I just remember that for my next project. Now that everything was done, we could give her a cute hairstyle. For that, I first brushed her hair again, and then I took a toothpick to sort the hair strands on the part line. Yarn loves to stick to itself, so it's quite difficult to bring them back in shape once mushed together. But again, with patience, everything is possible. To make the mouth on her back visible, it was clear that she needed some sort of short hairstyle. Moreover, I really wanted to give her bangs, since I think that makes everything cuter. So after sorting, I started trimming. Don't judge me, I'm not a hairstylist by any means, but I tried my best here. It took me quite a while to reach this point, but I wasn't able to tame her hair enough to look good in the back. So I had the idea to just give her 2 pigtails, and I really love that now. I also made her a braided hairband thing that I added to the hairstyle, which made it even cuter. Now we finished the whole doll, and the last thing to do was to give her an outfit. The first thing I always do when it comes to this is collecting all the things I have that could be fitting to the project. It makes it easier for me to have an overview of what I can do and what inspires me. Moreover, I finally gave my sewing machine another try and it worked! I sewed with a sewing machine! Guys, my life is so much better now, really. To make it even better, I used a professional pattern this time. Moonlight Jewel, who is also a doll artist here on YouTube, recently published her first sewing book that I had to buy, of course. Her outfits are always so creative and full of details, while extremely professional looking, so it was clear for me that I had to try out one of her patterns. Go check out her channel if you haven't already. For my project, I decided to go with the Lolita dress that I changed a little bit to have a free bag. I guess it's obvious why I needed that. And here you can see the result. It looks way more professional and the quality is also better. Moreover, I was able to finish it way quicker than usual, if you ignore the fact that I needed 2 days to figure out this stupid sewing machine, haha. Well, let's decorate it together. I started at the top and glued some cute little rhinestones around the collar section. They were in 2 different shades of violet and looked really good on the fabric. Next, I glued a big butterfly on the front since it's spring and that looked cute. Moreover, I wanted something different than the usual bow. As a little extra, I also glued some flower-shaped green rhinestones on the green part of her dress and some lilac butterflies on the white part. So, flowers and butterflies everywhere. Perfect for a spring design, I think. So, here's the doll! Her hands, of course, and her dress. Let's bring all the parts together. Aww, look at her! I think she's really cute. Just the way I wanted her to look like. With the monster parts in her back. Just ignore her legs. Like I said, it would have been better to let them unflocked in my opinion, but well, lesson learned again. I think a cute name for her would be Bonnie, and I'm sure you're already excited for her story. It's supposed to be a little scary, so if you're sensitive on that, please consider skipping that part. Easter time. The sun is shining, flowers are blooming, spring is in the air. Joyful children running around, laughing in search of all the wonderful colored Easter eggs that are hidden in the fresh greens of Mother Nature. But what is that? 2 plushy white ears looking out of a flower field. Nervously twitching by every sound and followed by a pair of big lavender eyes. A white Easter bunny. One curious child noticed, walking towards the jumpy little rabbit girl who quickly disappears into the flowers. What a shame. But wait, there she is again. Just a little further away, looking at the child as if she calls, "Come, follow the white rabbit." And so the child does, laughing, jumping, running into the woods. Further and further, always following those big innocent eyes. There she stands with her back leaning against a tree, only a few more steps to reach her. Happy Easter! I hope you liked this video and Bonnie's little story. Is it her being evil? Or is she possessed in some kind? Who knows? Please leave a like or comment and subscribe to never miss a new video. I really hope you have wonderful holidays, even though times are difficult at the moment. All your support is appreciated so much and I am incredibly thankful. Have a wonderful day, my little lynxes. See you soon. Cheers!